Okay, let's get underway. All right, welcome everyone to today's session on the release of Practical Compliance Guideline 2017-5. And specifically, we're looking at the information that the Commissioner has provided around commutations where a member has a total superannuation balance in excess of the $1.6 million. So we're going to have to see individuals either fully commute or partially commute those income streams down to comply with the introduction of those new superannuation measures from the 1st of July 2017. And this guidance provides us with the framework in how we need to act prior to the 30th of June. So like all of our sessions, of course, we need to provide you with the general advice disclaimer in terms of that what we are providing today is general advice only. So let's get stuck into a couple of things that I just wanted to make people aware of, because today's session is not just about going through the guidance, but helping you understand the challenges in terms of the time frame for implementation. We know we've got a federal budget tonight, so we're all fingers crossed that we don't see any further drastic changes or measures that we're going to impact SMSFs, but the implementation here that you can see on the left-hand side is the most challenging piece that is confronting professionals today. And this goes to the very heart of our Learn, Implement, Grow process within the SMSF Academy to give you the information and then the tools to effectively go and implement these measures. So today is not only about helping you understand the impact of the PCG 2017-5, but put in place for you the tools to actually go and execute on this as well for your SMSF clients, because as I said, there is very much some time sensitivity here around putting in place the right steps before the introduction of these new measures. So what do we have here? PCG 2017-5 is the Commissioner's public guidance in respect to how they're going to look at applying resources around SMSFs, where members need to meet the $1.6 million transfer balance cap amount from the 1st of July 2017. So what this guidance is specifically looking at is where the ATO will not apply compliance resources to reviewing commutations that are made as part of the introduction of this $1.6 million cap. So by way of background, we know that a commutation will need to occur, and that commutation from an income stream or income streams that a member may be currently receiving will need to do one of two things. They'll either need to roll over that amount and retain the amount within the accumulation phase interest for that specific member, or they will need to withdraw the amount from the SMSF as a lump sum payment. And of course, they could do any combination of those two if they chose to do so as well. So what we do understand though with this is that the timing issue here to determine what the value is, where we want a member to have exactly $1.6 million. So they'll have used 100% of their transfer balance cap amount as a result of the commutation. The financial statements we won't be in a position to finalise the financial reporting and position of the member's superannuation interests until sometime after the 30th of June 2017. So that may be we're waiting on tax statements, and we of course have our timing right through to potentially the 15th of May next year before we need to actually lodge the SMSF return, and we would know full well what the balance of that member's superannuation interest or interests actually are. So what the Commissioner talks about within this compliance guideline is that the way to address this matter specifically is for the member to make the request, and then B, that is then subsequently accepted by the trustees to commute their value of their income stream or income streams so that the value of those do not then exceed the $1.6 million. So here we're not looking specifically at dollar values because we can't determine that, but there is a request and acceptance here to ensure that it does comply with the 1.6. We did see in the initial legislation the ability to have a $100,000 buffer in essence. So if we've got a member that due to the requirements to commute their value down to 1.6 or under, if because of the changes and then the tax statements and stuff that happened at the end of this financial year, there was an amount that was slightly greater, so no more than $100,000 over the 1.6, and then it was rectified within the 6-month period thereafter, what would ultimately happen there is there would be no notional earnings attracted to that excess transfer balance amount. What we're going to see with SMSFs, I guess, is more than likely we will find that individuals will comply back to the 1.6, but we need the financials to be finalised before we can determine what that value is. So this is the framework which we must deal with and follow the bouncing ball, in essence, to ensure that the member at the 30th of June 2017 has put in place the right steps to ensure that their total superannuation balance will be equal to or less than the introduction of this general transfer balance cap amount. So let's move on, because what we need to first reference is what is a commutation, and we go back to tax ruling 2013-5 around when a pension commences and ceases. So we look at the definition that talks about where a member or the dependent beneficiary of that member commutes their income stream where there is a conscious and valid decision to exercise the right to some or all of the entitlement to receive future pension benefits that ultimately get paid as a lump sum. Now, the lump sum here can also mean a retained lump sum if it is their own superannuation interest. It is different when you look at a death benefit, and we'll be talking about that in our May webinar around the death benefits and the finalisation of Law Companion Guideline 2017-3. So what the ATO makes clear within this practical compliance guideline is that a request to commute is valid if it is consistent with the governing rules of the fund and the agreement between the member and the trustee under which the income stream is provided. So we do need to follow very carefully what the rules of the fund say around the ability to commute, and then also any terms and conditions that are part of the pension agreement. Again, that may be done by formal contract, resolutions or minutes. We need to follow the ball in respect to what the procedure is around that commutation. And what it must say is that it must be clear that some or all of those members' rights, or the dependent, again, if there's a death benefit, is to receive future income stream benefits, has been exchanged for a right to receive the lump sum. So again, when we go through the documentation piece here, these are the sorts of things that we need to be following to ensure that we have documented this right and comply with the specifics of this practical compliance guideline. So we do, as I said, we need to look at some of the governing rules and agreements of the income stream. So if we won't spend a lot of time here, but what we do have is we can go, if we go into our membership area and we go and we look here at, if we go into our support area, and then we've got our knowledge base, we've got a range of our sample documents that we have in here in respect to pensions and then also in respect to the fund. So what we need to ensure that we're doing is that we're, of course, looking specifically for the commutation requirements, and they're covered within Rule 25 that allows for a commutation to naturally occur. And again, whether we're doing that to roll the money back to accumulation phase or whether we are actually allowing for a lump sum to come out, and if it's a lump sum, how is that payment then being made as well? So we would be looking here specifically at Rule 25 around the payment of benefits, and then as we go into the actual rules of the fund itself, we're looking then for the ability for income streams and pension rollbacks, which then a pension rollback is defined to include a commutation whether made in part or in full. So we look for that, and then what we need to do is we need to make sure that our pension documents are again covering off on the fact that we actually have in place the ability for a member to roll back that amount as a result of the commutation. So again, we go into here, we look at the specifics for the ability to commute. If I open that up, we should be able to see here, it talks about for a commutation, whether in part or in full, and the fact that we need to comply specifically with the SIS Regulation 1.07D around the rollback of that income stream. So you do need to reference through each of the relevant areas to ensure that you've got those specifics covered off. So I just wanted to show you and share with you the importance of those two key areas. So let's now move on to the ATO's approach here. So the Commissioner, as I said up front, are not going to be applying compliance resources to reviewing the commutations of income streams where a member has an SMSF and inside that fund they have made this request and acceptance to commute before the 1st of July 2017. So there are some critical points here that are important to understand, and they include that the request and then the acceptance of that are made in writing. So the agreement by the trustee may be documented as a specific resolution. So the Commissioner is happy to do it in that way, and we've drafted some documentation to support it as a trustee minute or decision that has been formally documented. They are made before the 1st of July 2017. So we need to ensure that we are very specific that this document has been indicated as such prior to the introduction of the reform. So we have right up until the 30th of June to ensure that this documentation has been prepared. You may be going through a process with your clients at the moment to ensure that the advice is being provided as to how they're reducing their superannuation interest. So are they commuting a specific pension, and whether it's in part or in full? I know members of ours have pensions that have clients have 9 pensions or 10 pensions or whatever the case may be. So there has to be some specific decisions in respect to those as to what would be commuted and what ones will be retained and what ones may be withdrawn and so forth. What it also says within the practical compliance guideline is that we must specify the methodology that allows for the precise quantum of the amount to be commuted. So importantly here, we don't need to determine that amount now. What we can do is we can specify the method that we're going to do to commute and bring us back to the $1.6 million transfer balance cap amount, but that amount is to be ascertained at a later point in time. And that point in time, when it needs to be done by, again, we've got some further guidance from the Commissioner in respect to that, lining up with the annual return for the year. Importantly here, it needs to specify the income stream that will be subject to the commutation. I made note of this in our recent SMSF days, that it needs to extend just beyond the fact that we're going to be withdrawing benefits from superannuation interest generally to comply with the cap. The Commissioner has now made very clear you should know which interest is the one that's going to be targeted to specifically withdraw in part or in full, and which ones are going to be retained and therefore reported as a retirement phase income stream against that member's transfer balance cap. So where the request may cover more than one income stream, the request and acceptance here will need to specify the different income streams that may be covered, and then the order of priority in which those commutations are to occur. So whether you want to do this as one request or whether you want to do it as multiple requests, it's your ultimate decision here. We have separated them out into a singular, so it's one request per full commutation or per partial commutation. We got member feedback, and the overarching theme from our members was to do it as a specific interest. It makes it a lot easier to work through rather than, I guess, doing one resolution and then dealing with the specifics within that one document. So the way we've done it is we've broken it out into one document per pension, whether it's in part or in full. And then the final one is we need to ensure that this doesn't conflict with any other agreement that may be in place or is on foot to commute, where the trustee has already agreed to do so with a different super fund. We will have members that will have benefits in both APRA funds and SMSFs, so we need to ensure that the way in which we're approaching this doesn't conflict with any other agreements that may be on foot at the moment. So entering into agreement with the trustee of one fund to which these guidelines apply in conjunction with the commutation from a specific request from another fund isn't in itself going to cause the conflict. So in that regard, we can have specific directions being given to other funds so that we can comply itself, but we can't have one overarching request where it's covering different funds. We would need to have specific interests dealing with the specific superannuation funds to ensure that, again, we comply with the introduction of these new measures. So when we look at the annual compliance requirements here, the Commissioner is happy for us to ultimately put down now a decision to commute that income stream, whether in part or in full, and again, more than one. But we can then refer to the fact that as part of the completion of the fund's annual compliance requirements, we will then work out the specifics as to the physical amount that needs to be withdrawn. So to give you an example there, we have a member that might have a $2 million pension. There's been some advice that's been provided that says you would need to roll back $400,000 in order to comply with the introduction of the transfer balance cap measures. Now, so the advice might suggest that there's a commutation for $400,000, but through this approach, what we know is the physical amount that will occur can only be calculated once we've completed the 2017 financial statements. Now, that may end up meaning that the actual commutation value is $402,755, for example. But as long as we've documented the resolutions initially here, that we are to calculate that as part of the fund's annual compliance requirements, and that it's reflected in the financials for the 30th of June 2017 and is done no later than the SMSF annual return, then again, the Commissioner here is satisfied that you've met the requirements of not only the PCG 2017-5, but also what or how we deal with a commutation ordinarily when we go back and look at the tax ruling 2013-5 around when a pension commences and ceases. Importantly here, the agreement to commute, so the decision that we've made, once it has been made in the form here of a documented decision, both by request and resolution for acceptance, it cannot be subsequently revoked after the date of the agreement. So if the decision has been made to commute in full account-based pension number 2 rather than 1, and you decided that it would have been better the other way, it is in essence an irrevocable decision that has been made. So therefore it would need to follow suit that is then gone through. It doesn't, of course, prevent or preclude in the future the ability to change the way in which we may restructure that. So we may end up rolling that one back in the future and recommencing again and reporting those amounts against the transfer balance cap of that specific member at a future point in time. But for the purposes of compliance with the introduction of these measures, it is irrevocable in its form once it has been completed. So if the agreement to commute or the governing rule, so where there is an agreement to either commute or the governing rules allow a discretion for either the member or the trustee to revoke that agreement, then the ATO do raise questions whether there's a valid commutation that's actually in play and whether therefore it would be enforceable as such. So again, they're going to be looking at the specifics of the powers here of discretion for the trustee to make a change and ensuring that the member in making this request does complete it in a way that suggests that it is irrevocable and they're making it willingly, knowing the outcomes of the decisions that they've made throughout that process as well. So where does this guideline not apply, and what the Commissioner again covers here within PCG 2017-5. So the guidance here doesn't apply or does not apply where the request is dependent on the later exercising of discretion, either by the member or trustee of the fund with respect to the amount that can be commuted or the income stream that will be commuted. So again, where there's no, where it's not definitive as such in respect to those specific interests, then there's going to be a question as to whether the Commissioner has been satisfied that they've complied with these measures around the commutation. Again, where the request and or whether the amount is to be commuted is subject to certain actions occurring after the date in which the trustee accepts. So If the powers rest with the trustees to be able to make some changes in respect to that, again, the Commissioner isn't satisfied that would satisfy these requirements, again, going back to 2013-5 around the commutation guidance there, where we're consciously exchanging the right to future income streams to convert it to a lump sum and or retained lump sum. Again, the request here does not provide sufficient certainty with respect to identifying the income streams that are subject to the commutation request. So it's unclear here in respect to having identified that it is account-based pension number 2 or number 3 or number 9 or whatever it is, whether it's in part or whether it's in full. So the priority, if you're doing it in one document, being very clear to the specifics here. And again, if we don't satisfy that, then the commutation rules here and the approach that we take to commutation won't be satisfied. And finally, that the request and or amount to be commuted is dependent upon a decision or the exercising of discretion by the trustee of a different fund. So we can't be, again, relying on the circumstances outside of the SMSF to facilitate what that amount is here. We need to look at specifically to enable ourselves to commute back an amount that we determine out of a specific superannuation interest, separately to how we may deal with money that sits inside an APRA regulated fund. And what we will find with the APRA funds is that we will put in a formal request to comply and reduce a value, and we'll use that $100,000 threshold to deal with any unders or overs that may occur in respect to that superannuation income stream. So let's now move on and just take a look at a couple of examples here. So the first one is out of the PCG 2017-5, dealing with a single superannuation income stream interest. So on the 1st of May, we've got Liz has a single superannuation interest supporting a pension from her fund, and the pension's valued at $1.8 million currently. So we have to reduce her value by at least $200,000, and whether that amount is being rolled back to accumulation or lump summed or any combination of both, it doesn't really matter. So what we're doing here is Liz then puts in the request to the trustee in writing to commute amounts on 30 June in excess of the $1.6 million based on the value of the interest supporting her pensions at the 30th of June. The trustee acknowledges that and accepts the request, which is then also documented. So the amount of the commutation doesn't need to be worked out now, but it is worked out as part of the annual compliance requirements for the fund. The commutation value is reflected in the 30 June 17 accounts and needs to be done by the due date of the SMSF's annual return for the 30th of June 2017, because that information in respect to reportable values against the transfer balance cap is, of course, going to be included within the fund's SMSF annual return for this year. So on the basis of this example, the ATO will not then review the commutation, as the agreement to commute has been prepared in accordance with the specifics of paragraph 9 and 10 of PCG 2017-5. So again, it goes back to the request and then the acceptance, the fact that it's irrevocable, and that ensuring that we actually get that done as part of the financial requirements, and it's completed by the due date of the annual return of the SMSF, which opens up some challenges in itself, because we do, of course, have different dates we need to comply with. So understanding the lodgement program and where those clients fit in is going to become critically important as well, because we would have obviously 31 October dates, we'd have 28th of February dates, and we would have the 15th of May dates that we all need to adhere to. So then let's look at it in a different way, where we've got multiple income streams here. So on the 1st of May, Jim has the following 3 superannuation interests inside of his SMSF. So he's got his first pension, we'll call ABP number A, or A here, which is worth $100,000. We've got ABP B, valued at $1.2 million, and then his ABP C, which is valued at $600,000. So we've got $1.9 million here worth of income streams currently being paid to Jim. What he needs to do is he needs to make some decisions as to which income streams he's going to be reducing that value from. And it may be from one, which could be from either B or C, or it could be from A and then potentially out of B and or C as well. So we don't know that, and as part of the advice process, subject to potentially the different proportions in which those income streams have been established, we're going to work out as part of that advice process what ones we're going to reduce. Now, Jim will request the trustees in writing to commute amounts on the 30th of June in excess of the $1.6 million based on the value of the interest supporting his income streams at the 30th of June 2017. Now, the trustee can accept the request, which is documented, but the amount of which the commutation is worked out here, we need to ensure, so again, up the top there, we've got the fact that it needs to be done by 30 June 2017 in the financials and as part and completed prior to the due date of the tax return. But importantly here, the ATO has indicated that, again, it's not going to review the commutation requirements here as long as it complies with 2017-5 on the basis that the commutation specifies the income streams that will be subject to the agreement to commute. So again, it goes back to what I was just saying before. We need to be definitive here in respect to where it's coming from. So if we said that income stream A was made up, say, entirely of tax-free money, and C was made up predominantly of tax-free money, then where we would be indicating the partial commutation is that the request will be to partially commute income stream B. So therefore, the acceptance of that would occur by the trustees, and then as part of the completion of the financial statements, we would be specifically taking the value out of income stream B, and we would have no right, because the member decision was done as part of that request, to take out of B. That's where it would come out, to ensure that we satisfy the specifics that have been set out within Practical Compliance Guideline 2017-5. Okay, so again, we need to distinguish between when we've got the multiple interests, we need to be requesting in there where it is coming from. So what I want to do now is show you how we actually build out these documents going forward. So I'm going to flick across to our campus platform and go back into the documents area and go through and show you how we build out these documents. So what we have recently done here is we have added in a tab called Super Reforms. So we're now bringing in a suite of documents that you can then start to use here. So we're looking here specifically at the transfer balance cap for full commutation or the transfer balance cap for partial commutation. So we do have in all of our documents, I do a quick a screencast that explains the document that you're being able to generate, so you can watch that and understand the different what the different form fields actually mean if you've got any questions in those. And we talk about where we have our integrations with these as well. We are not quite finished integrations at the moment. I will show you towards the end of this how the integrations do work, because they won't be far away. In essence, to populate that information straight out of your SMSF software, which will save a significant amount of time. So let's move in and let's do a partial commutation here. So you can either preview it and then hit start, or you can just hit the start button. So in here we've got, we're looking at capturing, in the first instance, we're capturing obviously the fund information, and then we're capturing, if we'll say the Smith SMSF, we just put in an address and it will pick up wherever that is, so it doesn't matter where we are. It'll validate the address as being right. We have that as part of our ASIC requirements to ensure that when we generate a document through ASIC, it would be approved as an address, as the correct address. We're then looking at our trustee and member info here, so I'll just make it 2 individual trustees. It's recognising the address that we previously had, and then we put in our member details. So with the integrations with BGL and class, this information will all automatically populate. So it's basically just then going to require you to go to the page in, we're going to then start, we've got John as the chairman, and the meeting date can be today, and we're going to say John's the pension member that we're reducing his value, And then, so all this information will automatically populate, and then you'll really be taking yourself to here, which will ask some specific information about the partial commutation. So we put in here the pension that's being commuted. In this case, we'll say it's account-based pension number 2. So you might have in your SMSF software a specific description that you have in there, so you distinguish between the multiple pensions. Doesn't matter what you actually call it. You can just call it account-based pension if there's only one, if that's what you want to do. We then go in and put the rule or clause that will allow for that commutation to occur. So 25 is within the SMSF Academy's deed. You choose whether it's a rule or a clause or something else. We're going to have the effective date of the partial commutation being the 30th of June. And then we need to make a decision as to whether we're rolling that amount back to accumulation or taking out as a lump sum. Now, if it is going to be a lump sum, we can choose cash or in specie. We're going to get some feedback from people. If it is going to be a lump sum, I actually believe that our existing partial commutation documents will be better to use than this one, and I'll come back and explain that shortly. But if we simply here rolling back to accumulation, we will then, these documents will push all that information out. The reason why I say the other documents might be better, we do have, as it currently stands with partial commutations, the ability to elect to treat the amount as a lump sum for tax purposes using the Reg 995 election and the like as well. So you'll see here we've then submitted or about to submit based on your level of membership. You can see here as a gold member or the administrator in essence here, it's included as part of the membership. So this is available for both our silver level and gold level members to use as part of this monthly subscription. For those that wish to buy this as a pay-as-you-go basis, at that point you would just ordinarily include your credit card information to enable the specific payment of that document. So you can see there that's now processing and it will take a couple of minutes to do so. I'm not going to hang around and wait for that. Well, obviously you can see some I've been preparing previously here. So we'll go through and just show you some of these different documents. So we've got here the full commutation, so we can simply download that document here. And when we look at the request, what you'll be able to see in here is that we have the Smith SMSF in this case here. So in order to comply with the introduction of the transfer balance cap that will commence on the 1st of July, I hereby request to fully commute my existing account-based pension here, known as ABP number 3, and then on the 30th of June. So that's the request date. I ask that as the completion of the financials, we actually need the trustees to determine the value to ensure that the total value of my reported income streams in retirement phase will not exceed the 1.6. I request that the amounts are to be rolled back to my accumulation phase. It does not conflict with any other request to comply, so we're going into some of the specifics I talked about earlier within the practical compliance guideline. And then I make this request willingly and understand that the decision cannot be altered or revoked by me for it to be valid, and then any further change. So we then have our meeting, and that meeting will then confirm that there's been an irrevocable request to commute. They've requested that the full commutation is to be rolled back and that we need to determine that amount as part of the annual compliance requirements. So it's noted that the full commutation is to be reflected in the financial statements at 30 June and must be confirmed by no later than the due date of the return. We have our powers here to be able to commute that specific income stream, and then we have the specific resolutions that will allow us to do so. So then we finish that off with the trustees will provide further information in respect to confirming the actual amount, along with the reporting requirements against the members' transfer balance cap as part of the completion of the fund's annual compliance requirements. So it's a very similar document when we look at the partial commutations. So once these get delivered from the system or it's been generated, it will deliver it both by email, but then also within this completed orders area. So that's just processing it still at the moment. So if I go down to the partial commutation, same drill will be in here. So we're looking to partially commute rather than fully commute. We've got the specifics in there, and again, we're following the bouncing ball when it comes to Practical Compliance Guideline 2017-5. So these are ready to go right now for you to start engaging with your clients around the specifics of the transfer balance cap and the need to, in essence, have this information ready to go. So as I said, we will shortly be having these fully integrated with the specific SMSF softwares, whether it's BGL or Class. Doesn't matter which there. If we just look at a pension rollback, just to show you what this will actually do, it will allow you to go and look up the specific fund. So if we've got Citizen Family Fund here, what it will allow you to do is to then go in, select your fund, select the member in which is currently being paid and the specific interest again. So we're drilling down and saying, well, that's the one that we're looking at. We then will import that data into the form, and all of the information in respect to that will then populate that order form so you can see the import that's happened there. And then you're simply going through and filling out a couple of unknowns that we don't know inside the actual deed, but you can see all the information being populated in there. So next, submit, and your document has been generated. So that's the power of what the integration can do and save you a significant amount of time, I guess, in keying, but also in terms of errors that may be made yourself. So we can do this across any of our sort of super reform documents, as you can do it with trust deeds as well. So if you look at the BGL Simple Fund, the same sort of scenario applies. It's simply a one-time connect. So you'll go in, you'll connect to your actual application. So if I just quickly connect here, and then once that connection is done, it will enable you to use the drop menu to go down and choose the specific documents that you want. So same sort of scenario, you're then going in, selecting the fund. We've only got a training fund and stuff here to be able to use. Again, looking at the ruler clause, allowing which ones to be rolled back, and then following through on that process. So this is a very powerful way of going through and doing a range of documents, not only in respect to the super reform measures and the specifics of rolling back amounts to comply with the cap, but we've got many of our members at the moment going through and doing this for things like the SMSF update, deed updates, because there's just a few form fields that need to be done and the rest of it automatically populates. So hopefully that's given you a bit of an understanding around the specifics in terms of the time to build. So let's just go back and sort of wrap up with some questions that we have, and I guess where we're going with all of our document suite. So like I said, we've built out things like now specifically the full commutation and partial commutation to comply with the cap. You can see if I go back to here, our document suite, we have nearly 40 documents in here at the moment. We have a price list that you can access. And as I mentioned earlier, we have this super reforms one that outlines what we have currently available and then what is coming soon. So if I just go back again, sorry. Yeah, so we've got our super reforms ones here. You can see, so these are available, where we've got coming soon. They're going to be released. We're expecting to have that released in the next month. So whether it's from fund setup and maintenance, incorporations, contributions and the like, they're all there virtually ready to go. If we go back here, so we are continuing to build out many of these documents. As I've said, CGT relief is one that's obviously coming, and we're doing some additional work around some CGT tools to help you understand and optimize the right outcomes with that. Things where we may be adopting the proportionate method during this year for CGT relief or into the future as a result of the prohibition on segregation. We already have in place the ability to roll back income streams, including TRISs, if you're no longer going to have those TRISs. And another one that we've added into that suite of super reform documents is adding an account-based pension as a special rule of the fund. So where we have a pension in existence, we're upgrading to our current deed. Typically our pension documents will enable that income stream to become a special rule, which means you can change the terms and conditions of that pension, i.e. add a reversionary, remove a reversionary, etc., without having to commute and repurchase. So this is a document that's just been recently added as well that will enable you to add those existing terms and conditions as a rule of the fund, and therefore can allow you to, I guess, make changes in the future as you see fit. So we're going to keep building and building and building in respect to many of these measures. So if there are things that you would like, or you can provide us feedback on that you want to see being used, we'd be more than happy to look at building that out. There's so much going on at the moment, so trying to keep up with everything and give some prioritisation around these, of course, probably the number one challenge at the moment. So for those of you that are members, I wanted to make you aware that those documents are now available to use. For those of you that aren't, you can access these documents under our membership levels, either as a silver or a gold level membership. You can see the pricings there, how that would work if you want to buy this on a pay-as-you-go basis. They are going to be priced at $220 plus GST to buy them on a pay-as-you-go basis. So obviously you can do the maths around whether a membership model would be more beneficial or not for you. Of course, you get access to the complete suite of documents throughout, which is one of the benefits of membership. In addition to the technical support and the training and the documents and stuff, you're also getting the leverage of those software integrations if you're using Class or Simple Fund 360 as well. So the other thing I just wanted to note, so if you'd want to find out more about this, you can make a time with me to discuss. Any questions that you may have, I'll add that link into the chat area as well. If you want to be able to, I guess, access that and have a conversation with me further. So I'll just do that whilst I'm come back to answer some questions. There are a couple of questions on here, so I am happy now to go back and answer those. So if you've got any specifics, please feel free to add them or ask them in the chat area or in the questions area. So Daniel here, apologies for the basic question, but what's the main difference between partial and full? Okay, so it's a good one, because what's important to understand is that where we decide to commute an income stream, we can either choose to roll it back in full, i.e. a full commutation, or we can choose to roll back part of it. So if we go back to the example with the single one for Liz, so she has one income stream and she needs to reduce the amount by $200,000. So she's not going to stop that income stream. She's only going to partially commute $200,000 of that. So the pension will continue, but she's making a conscious decision to change $200,000 of value that has a right to a future income stream into a lump sum benefit. Now, again, that lump sum can be rolled back, or it can be, in essence, taken out as a lump sum of the fund. So retained lump sum or a lump sum out of the superannuation system. Whereas if we look at this example with Jim, if he decided to put in a specific request to reduce his $300,000 out of first income stream A, then income stream B, income stream A will need to be fully commuted, i.e. he's rolling that money back. He's taking out the entire value of that income stream, i.e. it becomes a full commutation. The additional $200,000 would be coming out of income stream B, which therefore means, again, it wouldn't be ceased in full, but in part, exchanging the future right to income for the lump sum. So that's the difference, and therefore, subject to which pensions are being reduced, you may need to decide on whether it's a full commutation or a partial commutation. So let's go back and see what other questions, because we do have a couple here. Let's go down. So Linda, is there an intention on the horizon to allow Supermate software? Yes, I have made some inquiries around that. I don't have any definitive time frame on that at the moment, so I couldn't say to you that we'll have that ready to go by the 30th of June, but it is on our radar to look at having that Supermate integration done in the back half of this year. So that's the best I can do at the moment for you there, Linda. Peter, in the example, why did you commute the pension with the taxable amount and leave the pension with the tax-free amount in pension mode? There was no, I guess in the example, there was no specifics there to say what those amounts were, but generally we would be commuting the taxable amount first because the one with the highest taxable proportion will obviously go back to taxable component, and we want to keep the tax-free proportion ones, the ones with the highest tax-free proportion, because they will be still subject to the proportioning rule. So where we are going to be rolling monies back to accumulation phase, we will no longer have those benefits subject to the proportioning rule, which means they're growing the taxable component. So if we've spent a lot of time setting up income streams as multiple pensions to leverage the benefit of the proportioning rule, we would want to try and retain those for as long as we possibly can. So therefore, we would be targeting the rollbacks out of those we'd be targeting rolling back the amounts with the higher taxable proportions rather than the tax-free proportions. And I think I've just answered Ross's question there as well. So is there a preference to commuting low tax-free pensions or high tax-free? So I think generally you'd be looking at the low tax-free ones because, again, the proportioning rule will continue on for the retirement phase income streams as opposed to the excessive amounts as well. Anthony asks here, what is the tax position in a member's hands based on full or partial? So if we're rolling the money back to accumulation phase, the accumulation phase, it's simply just a rollback, and the only tax consequence will happen in the fund going forward, so prospectively. If the lump sum comes out of the superannuation system as a result of the commutation, we then, of course, need to consider the age of the individual. So if they're over 60 years of age or over, it's not assessable in their hands. If they're under 60 years of age, then they would have the low rate cap available to them between preservation age and 59. So from that point of view, there are some differences there, but if it's just rolling back to accumulation phase, the only tax effect comes prospectively with fund earnings. So what else? Kerry, what do you recommend in regards to someone's current pension is valued at 1.5, but come 30 June 17, the pension has grown to 1.7 with earnings that we don't know until the accounts are complete. Do you think it is worthwhile creating the commutation request in advance? Yeah, I think that's a good, I think that would be a prudent approach because what you would be acknowledging and you would be aware, it sounds like you would be aware of this situation. So you understand that the member's total superannuation balance at the moment is in excess or is expected to be in excess of the $1.6 million, and therefore you're looking to reduce the value down. And again, you'd want to be, if you know there's more than one pension, the request needs to be very specific to that. So that might be something, I'll make sure that sort of scenario is covered off in the forms. I think it is, but I'll double check that because if the balance is going to be potentially under now and then it might grow, yeah, I think we've got it covered off, but I will just double check for you. But in that example, if the expectation is that it will grow, then you should be doing the request now because it then gives you time within the accounts to ensure that that commutation does occur to reflect the $1.6 million value at the 30th of June 17 to be done as part of the annual compliance requirements, and therefore you would have $100,000 that would be rolled back into the accumulation phase of the fund or ultimately taken out of the fund. So Donna there, are we able to do an integration with BGL Simple Fund, not 360 with the documents? So BGL, the desktop, we don't have an integration for. So there's the ability to pass the data through on desktop doesn't work to the same extent that we can use what's called the API. So the programming interface to basically pass data between two systems. So it connects the two systems. So with the desktop, you will need to, in essence, key in that information into the system. You can see how quickly it is. It's not a huge burden of time to be able to have to populate that yourself, but we don't have an integration with the desktop just because I guess BGL don't have any API integration features to be able to do that with desktop, and most of their resources, of course, as well, are being pushed towards the Simple Fund 360 product. What else we got here? So Charmaine, as far as the preparation of these elections or requests, we as unlicensed accountants would be waiting for the advice from the advisor and then preparing, correct? Yes, that would be correct. So you would be, the decisions here are in essence being directed by the member. So this is an important distinction that I've spoken to people recently about. You need to look at, in terms of what you can and can't do around licensing, are you speaking to the member or are you speaking to the trustee? So if you're speaking to the member, and this is a member level direction. So this is, if it's a member level direction around the specific commutation and the specific interest of that to be commuted, you are giving consideration to the personal circumstances of that member, which therefore would have an AFSL overlay to it. Once that decision has been made, then of course you're talking to the trust at the trustee level in terms of the activities that need to be done to comply with the direction that the member has provided. So yes, Charmaine, there, ordinarily you're waiting for that advice that's coming from the specific member, unless you're providing that advice yourself, but obviously there is the licensing regime around it, or where the member has given you the specific requests about it. So they may have not wanted to take advice, so you may have suggested they seek advice, they've decided not to. If that's the case, I would then be, you could go ahead and prepare this, but I would be making it very clear that you're acting on instructions based on what the member has given you, and therefore the specifics of that, you are satisfied yourself that there has been no advice provided in that. And again, making sure that the client is fully aware that that's the case, and I would have them accept that in some way, shape or form by signing something or by confirming an email that you have on your system that you have acted on instructions only, whether it's come from the member or a recommendation from someone who is suitably qualified to provide that advice as well. So yes, it's the next step, because we're dealing specifically with the trust, the request from the member, and you're having that discussion at the trustee level to deal with the compliance requirements of what PCG 2017-5 talks about. So the same goes with deeds, trust deed updates. There's no recommendations and stuff that's needed around that. You're dealing with it at the trustee level. So the deeds can go through and you can make that recommendation, or the client can, you can in essence go through and do that update, because it's not taking into the consideration the personal needs and circumstances at the member level. And as is the case in my view with all the CGT relief provisions as well. But of course, we've got our tax practitioner obligations that sit over the top of that. So like I said, that's pretty much it from today. It looks like they're all the questions. So it was a webinar, I guess, quickly to make you aware of that important approach that needs to be taken in the lead up to 30 June. We are closing to 30 June at a very rapid rate. So the importance of putting this in place for you in a timely fashion was critically important. So it is about identifying those clients with $1.6 million balances. It is getting to them, talking through the specifics, but then putting in place the tools to effectively implement. And that's what I spoke about up front. We know from the way we survey and ask questions of our members, and more broadly those that attend our training, where the challenge is. This goes to the very core of helping meet the challenges of implementation by the reform. So thank you once again for being a part of today's session. If you do have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to me. But other than that, happy rest of the time over the next few weeks going through the reforms. Happy budget night. Hopefully we don't see any other things to keep us busy and awake at night. I think we've got enough on our plate as we speak. And I look forward to hopefully you turning up to our next webinar, which will be covering the topic of SMSF death benefits, because that law companion guideline has been finalised in the last 24 hours as well. So thank you all, and I wish you a pleasant rest of the day. Cheers.